Numbers are still trickling in, but now we have a more clear picture of who will lead our country for the next 4 years. CTV News is declaring the Liberals have won enough seats in the 45th federal election to form a minority government. Mark Carney vowed to govern for all Canadians after leading the Liberals to a narrow victory on Monday in an election dominated by issues like affordability, tariffs, and annexation threats from U.S. President Donald Trump. Joining us now to break it all down for us is Curtis Brown from Probe Research. Good morning, Curtis.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. Now, when we were watching the coverage last night, it looked so close at some points. It was tough to tell how this was all going to play out.
Yeah, well, I think early in the evening it looked like the Liberals were going to win the most seats. But yeah, there was a point where it really started to tighten up, and it looked like you started to see Conservatives, outperforming the polls a little bit, looking like, especially in Ontario, there were a lot of seats like in the Greater Toronto area and a few kind of in areas that traditionally vote NDP where the Conservatives actually managed to take the lead and win. But yeah, in the end, it was always going to be a question of whether it was going to be maybe a bare Liberal majority or a strong minority, but it looks like we're going to be in that kind of strong minority position. And what happens next and how the Liberals will govern, and also what happens with the Conservatives since their leader doesn't have a seat. There's a lot of fascinating questions that are going to have to be resolved in the next few weeks here.
Any surprises for you last night?
I don't know if anything was like a huge surprise. I was, like I said, I was surprised a little bit to see the Conservatives win some kind of traditional NDP seats, especially by as much as we did. Elmwood Transcona in Winnipeg is a good example of that, where I think, yeah, the Liberal vote ate into the NDP, or the Liberal surge ate into the NDP's vote, and the Conservatives, even though they lost that seat in a by-election, were able to take the seat. Winnipeg West, the Liberals winning by as much as they did was a little bit of a surprise. I thought it might be a little bit tighter. But and then also in northern Manitoba with Churchill Quadnook Ski. I wouldn't say it was a surprise, but yeah, that was also a pretty emphatic victory for the Liberals and what has been a long-time NDP seat in Manitoba.
We had record-breaking advance polling this election, 25% higher than what it was in the last election. What does that tell you?
Yeah, it tells us that I think people were really plugged into this election, eager to vote. It looks like turnout is up overall, and a lot of people voted in advance. And I think just based on how things shake out, we can probably extrapolate that a lot of that advance vote was people voting for the Liberals, and because especially once they counted those votes at the end of the night, that seemed to pad their margins in some seats. Also, some pre-election polling suggested that the Liberals did have a bit of an edge in terms of people in advance vote. We saw one of the interesting things. I mean, like in this election, is how it's just so different from a few months ago, and we saw in our own polling, and it's reflected in national polling, older people, who may have been more likely to advance vote, or some of the ones who really, came out for the Liberals and really gave them, saved them essentially from, what looked like was going to be a historic drubbing 4 or 5 months ago to now having a, having a fourth term in government.
In this case, do you think the Liberals won, or do you think Mark Carney won?
Probably more Mark Carney. I mean, the Liberal brand seems to always kind of evolve. They'll, I can't remember who said it, but there's a saying that, you always think the Liberal Party's dead until they bounce up off the mat and punch you in the nose. And and it's one of those things where, yeah, they seem to, look like they were all but toast in the early 2010s, and then Justin Trudeau became leader, and they, won a majority government. It looked like they were kind of heading to that same place again, and they came back. It seems to. It's surprising just how resilient that party is, and I think, yeah, for Conservatives it has to be quite disappointing, because it looked like they were going to win a massive majority, and now you have a situation. I mean, they outperformed in some ways the polls, but I mean, their own leader lost his seat, and that was, I mean, there were some indications that might happen, but that is a bit of a surprise for sure.